Inside the cockpit of the F-15E Strike Eagle, the radar warning receiver let out a sharp, rising tone just as the jet cleared the 12,000-foot ridgeline of the Zagros Mountains. The pilot shoved the throttles forward, pushing the aircraft into full afterburner as the twin F-100-PW-229 engines surged, pouring out nearly 58,000 pounds of thrust. Moments later, an Iranian surface-to-air system, a shore-based variant of the Sayyad-2, burst just 12 feet from the left engine nozzle. The aircraft shuddered violently. Warning lights filled the cockpit as the flight control system began to fail. Eject, eject, eject. The ACE's 2 ejection seats fired, launching the pilot and weapons systems officer into the freezing air at nearly 600 miles per hour. Beneath them, the $84 million Strike Eagle rolled into an uncontrollable flat spin before coming down hard on the rocky slopes of Khuzestan, erupting into a massive plume of fuel, smoke, and shattered metal. 90 miles away, 2 HH-60G Pave Hawk rescue helicopters dropped to just 50 feet above the desert floor. Their rotors carved through the dust as they raced toward the emergency beacon. High above, 2 A-10 Warthogs circled in a protective pattern, waiting for the call. The lead Pave Hawk slowed into a hover near the pilot's GPS coordinates. Then the hillside came alive. Iranian asymmetric units opened up from hidden limestone caves with RPG-7s and 23mm anti-aircraft cannons. A direct strike slammed into the lead helicopter's tail boom. The pilot fought hard against the torque as the aircraft spun almost 180 degrees, black smoke rolling past the engine intakes. From the open doors, the gunners answered with GAU 18/A .50 caliber machine guns, sending bright tracer lines across the ridgeline. Above them, the lead A-10 rolled into a 30-degree dive. Its GAU-8 Avenger cannon spun up, reaching a rate of nearly 3,900 rounds per minute. The 30mm rounds tore into the hidden positions, blasting cave entrances into clouds of dust, stone, and twisted metal. Each impact struck with tremendous force, breaking up the firing points in seconds. The second A-10 released 4 GBU 12 Paveway 2 laser-guided bombs. The 500-pound munitions followed their laser marks toward Iranian technical vehicles below. The strikes lifted the vehicles off the ground and scattered debris across the desert slope. The rescue crew pulled the pilot into the shaking cabin of the damaged Pave Hawk. But the weapons systems officer's signal had gone silent. With the mission turning more dangerous by the second, both helicopters pulled power and pushed forward at maximum speed, retreating beneath a shield of 30mm cannon fire. As the HH-60S moved into their extraction path, more Iranian fighters revealed hidden ZU-23-2 anti-aircraft cannons beneath camouflage netting on the reverse slopes. The 23mm armor-piercing incendiary rounds struck the underside of the lead HH-60 Pave Hawk, punching through the airframe in rapid succession. Inside the cabin, 2 U.S. crew members were hit by flying fragments as the helicopter shook under the impact. Iranian state media later broadcast the moment the rounds connected. At nearly the same time, 9K-38 Igla-S shoulder-fired missiles rose from the high ridge lines. The first missed its mark, but the second burst near the engine intake of the second HH-60 Pave Hawk, sending heated metal fragments into the turbine and forcing the aircraft into a critical emergency. The A-10 Warthog overhead, still trying to protect the rescue team, came under heavy machine gun pressure from several directions at once. 12.7mm rounds struck its reinforced wings and engine housings, testing the aircraft's legendary durability. On the ground, Iranian forces moved with deliberate aggression. They used the broken terrain of the Zagros Mountains to remain inside the blind spots of the circling jets, forcing American pilots lower and slower into a dangerous envelope of anti-aircraft fire. The Iranian units were willing to sacrifice light infantry formations for even a single chance to bring down a rescue helicopter, refusing to pull back as 30mm rounds began tearing across their positions. Far away, on the 4-acre flight deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the electromagnetic aircraft launch system entered a rapid launch cycle. Unlike the older steam catapults, EMALs used a controlled surge of electrical power to drive a 66,000-pound F/A-18E Super Hornet from 0 to 150 miles per hour in less than 300 feet. The tempo was relentless. Every 45 seconds, another jet was thrown into the sky. We want to recognize the men and women currently serving aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Boxer. Many of you watching have served on these ships or have sons and daughters connected to the 494th Fighter Squadron. The machine is only as strong as the American hands that keep it running. If you are a veteran, an active duty service member, or part of a military family, share your ship's name or squadron unit number in the comments. We stand with you. As the air wing from the USS Gerald R. Ford moved north, the USS Boxer took position in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran responded with one of its main asymmetric tactics, the swarm. 40 fast attack craft built from fiberglass and armed with twin-barrel 20mm cannons and unguided rockets surged out from hidden coves near Keshem Island. They moved toward the USS Boxer at nearly 50 miles per hour, weaving in unpredictable patterns to disrupt the ship's targeting systems. The Boxer activated its defensive perimeter. On the flight deck, AV-8B Harriers taxied into position. 2 jump jets launched in short takeoffs, dropped to 200 feet, and lined up on the lead boats. Their GAU-12 Equalizer 25mm cannons ripped across the waterline, striking the front edge of the swarm. On the ship itself, the Mark 38 25mm machine gun systems locked into computer-controlled tracking. Their barrels followed the zigzagging boats and fired controlled 3-round bursts, punching through engines and disabling Iranian vessels before they could close the distance. When one boat managed to launch a 107mm rocket toward the hull, the USS Boxer's RIM-116 rolling airframe missile system responded instantly. The missile spun as it left the launcher, its infrared seeker locking onto the rocket's heat signature before intercepting it roughly 200 yards from the ship. Iran's refusal to back down turned into a broad, uneven surge of coastal assets. While the USS Boxer dealt with the swarm boats, Iranian forces activated mobile cruise missile launchers concealed inside limestone sea caves along the Strait of Hormuz. A volley of 4 Nor anti-ship missiles launched from the coastline. The missiles dropped to a sea-skimming altitude of only 15 feet and raced toward the USS Boxer at approximately 670 miles per hour. Inside the Boxer's radar room, the atmosphere shifted into focused urgency as the ship's electronic warfare systems worked to break the incoming missile's radar locks. One Iranian missile executed a sharp terminal pop-up maneuver, forcing the USS Boxer to launch a RIM-116 rolling airframe missile at extremely close range. Along the shoreline, Iranian artillery batteries began a sustained bombardment of the shipping lanes. They fired 155mm high-explosive shells into the water, attempting to disrupt the Navy's optoelectronic sensors and obscure the view of the Iranian coastline. Then the EA-18G Growler detected a new signal cutting through the noise, the distinctive chirp of an Iranian S-300 long-range radar. The pilot flipped the master arm switch and released an AGM-88E AARGM. Its rocket motor ignited instantly, driving the missile forward at nearly 1,500 miles per hour. On the ground, the Iranian radar operator saw the threat coming and shut down the transmitter, trying to disappear from the missile's tracking system. But the move came too late. The AGM-88E had already marked the location. Its internal GPS and millimeter wave seeker carried it toward the radar site, even after the signal went dark. Seconds later, the missile struck the radar trailer and its 150-pound payload tore through the equipment, taking the enemy's long-range detection network out of the fight. With those radar systems knocked offline, 2 F-35C Lightning II fighters moved in under low observability. Their internal weapons bays opened and GBU-53/B Stormbreaker munitions dropped into the air. The small glide weapons unfolded their wings and began scanning the terrain with multimode seekers, searching for mobile missile launchers hidden along tree lines and broken ground. 3 launchers were struck almost at the same moment. The secondary blasts from their own stored missiles sent rocket motors spinning across the battlefield, throwing confusion through nearby Iranian formations. Then the B-1B Lancer bombers received fresh targeting data through the Navy's E-2D Advanced Hawkeye Command aircraft. The bombers opened their large internal bays and released volleys of AGM-158J ASSM cruise missiles. The weapons dropped low over the water, flying just feet above the surface at nearly 600 miles per hour. In the final seconds of flight, the missiles climbed sharply, then angled down toward reinforced concrete structures. Their heavy penetrator payloads punched through layers of earth and hardened roofing before detonating deep inside the targets. Iran tried to overwhelm the USS Gerald R. Ford's defenses with a wave of 60 Shade 136 one-way attack drones. Powered by small piston engines, they moved slowly across the sky at roughly 115 miles per hour. The Ford did not waste long-range interceptors on them. Instead, the ship brought its phalanx CIWS into action. Guided by its own radar, the 20mm Vulcan cannon fired a dense stream of tungsten rounds at 4,500 rounds per minute. The drones broke apart in midair, their fuel tanks flashing briefly before falling into the sea. At the same time, the USS Gerald R. Ford's RIM-162 ESSM missiles engaged higher altitude threats. They blasted out of their vertical launch cells in columns of white smoke, then pulled hard turns toward Iranian anti-ship missiles fired from shore. Each intercept released a violent shockwave as the weapons met at extreme closing speed. The Iranian Air Force launched its remaining F-14 Tomcats and MiG-29s in a last attempt to break through the blockade. But Navy F-35C Lightning IIs and F/A-18E Super Hornets detected them from nearly 150 miles away using AN/APG 81AESA radar and linked battlefield data. The Navy pilots fired AIM-120DAMR AAMS before the Iranian aircraft could get close. The missiles accelerated to around 3,000 miles per hour, using active radar seekers to guide themselves in the final phase. Iranian pilots were struggling through heavy electronic interference from EA-18G Growlers, their radar pictures degraded and unreliable. In the first minute of the engagement, 4 Iranian jets were removed from the fight before their pilots ever had a clear view of the aircraft targeting them. One Iranian MiG-29 tried to close the distance for a short-range attack, but an F/A-18E Super Hornet pilot used the AIM-9X Sidewinder with the joint helmet-mounted cueing system. The pilot only had to look toward the target and fire. The AIM-9X snapped into a brutal high-G turn, its thrust vectoring motor pulling the missile through a sharp arc before it struck the MiG and ended the maneuver. At sea, the Iranian Navy attempted to move larger frigates out of port. The USS Boxer detected the activity and launched 2 F/A-18E Super Hornets, armed with AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles. The Harpoons dropped to a sea-skimming altitude of roughly 15 feet. At 530 miles per hour, they blended into the wave clutter, making detection extremely difficult. The first missile struck an Iranian frigate at the waterline, detonating inside the vessel and breaking its ability to remain afloat within minutes. The second AGM-84 Harpoon hit the port's fuel pier. The impact triggered a chain of secondary explosions that disabled several patrol boats and crippled the main refueling infrastructure at the local Iranian naval base. As the USS Gerald R. Ford moved into a tighter blockade position under the cover of a sandstorm, Iranian civilian-style dhows released dozens of EM-52 rocket-rising mines into the deeper channels. These weapons wait below the surface until they detect a target, then launch a rocket-propelled charge upward toward the hull. The USS Boxer's sonar detected the first launch as a sharp acoustic spike rising from the seabed. The mine detonated roughly 50 feet off the port side, and the shockwave temporarily disrupted the ship's secondary communications array. Iran continued using rockets, mines, coastal launchers, and pressure tactics to slow the operation, while the missing weapons systems officer became a central focus of the crisis. U.S. forces answered with precise strikes, clearing threats across the coastline and tightening control of the battle space. A final wave of heavy air operations hit key missile sites and hardened strategic facilities, sharply reducing Iran's ability to respond. With organized resistance fading, U.S. forces held their position and continued the high-stakes rescue mission as the situation moved toward a decisive turning point.